Hey there, welcome to the Common Sense Show. And I have special guest David Garofalo today, and I'm excited to talk about gold investing. There's a lot of folks out there who are trying to diversify their investment portfolios now who listen to the Common Sense Show. And I understand that some of you are invested in real assets, real property. Some of you are small business or medium business owners, founders, entrepreneurs, and you're looking to grow your investment. Perhaps you have a little bit of Bitcoin, maybe you have some cash holdings, maybe you're invested in bonds. Hopefully your money is not in SVB. That's a whole nother conversation for another day. But today we're going to talk about investing in precious metals. Now, I know what you're thinking. It's 2023, and how does precious metal actually line up to what your goals are? We're going to talk to David Garofalo, Chief Executive Officer and Chairman of Gold Royalty today about that. He has a wonderful story. He's an interesting man, and I'm excited to get this thing going. So let's get him in and learn about him and learn more about Gold Realty. Hey, David, welcome to the Common Sense Show.
Thanks, Mike. I'm delighted to be here.
Awesome. So, just a little bit about you. You are the Chief Executive Officer, President, Chairman, and Director. So, essentially, you're the guy. You're the chief cook, and everyone comes to you for every single reason at Gold Royalty. So you've been globally recognized as a chief executive with over 30 years of experience in creating and growing multi-billion-dollar sustainable mining businesses, which is a fascinating thing because we don't always come across someone with experience in mining. So I want to dig into that a little bit. You've also been senior vice president, finance, and chief financial officer and director of, correct me if I'm wrong, Agnico Eagle.
That's correct.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Good thing I took those English classes. I scored A. I was A in English class from 1998 to 2010. And then you've also had various financial roles in other mining corporations. What's your favorite part of your job? What you do, would you say?
Building mines. What's really interesting about building mines is you're finding something on the ground of significant value, that economic value people didn't realize existed in the first place. So there's the exploration phase. There's the phase where you make the investment case for what's generally a very capital intensive business, high barriers of entry. You're having to raise many millions and billions of dollars in order to build a mine. And then you're creating sustainable value over a long period of time, generally in communities that lack investment. Mines generally are not found in urban centers. They're found in very remote parts of the world where there are very poor communities, and you're creating generations of value for those communities and for the governments in terms of tax revenues, a fiscal base, and creating infrastructure in communities where none exists generally. So it's really attractive socially for me. I think it's almost been a social cause for me more than an economic one. Because over the course of my 33-year career, I've built over 15 mines and in many remote parts of the world, many continents in the world, and created significant value. Many of those mines are still operating, creating value. And I imagine that it's created opportunities for many generations of the children of those initial families that we engaged with when we built those mines to get post-secondary education, become professionals, and raise their standard of living, not only within the local community, but in the broader country as well.
Yeah, that's interesting because everyone I've seen who interviews you doesn't start there. They typically jump right into the investment piece and they want to talk about the tangibility of gold. But what you said about mining gold in particular seems a little contraindicated to what probably people think and believe about mining and its contribution to the workforce that actually engages with working in the mine, to the general local community. Why do you think that those misconceptions exist?
Well, historically, mining's had a terrible environmental reputation. And I think by and large, that's passed, particularly among the well-capitalized companies in the world. They couldn't raise capital. They couldn't be listed on a stock exchange unless they were responsible environmental stewards. And these days, in order to get a social and environmental license and a government permit in order to build a mine, you also have to be able to file a closure plan and provide bonding up front before you actually put a shovel in the ground to provide the assurance not only to the government but the local community that you're going to be there upon the closure of the mine, because these are finite life assets. Eventually they're exhausted, but you're there to basically reinstate the property back to its original state prior to the exploitation of those minerals. But listen, every economy, every developed economy in the world, if you think of the most developed nations in the Western world, have started with a thriving primary industry. You can't have a secondary and tertiary industry unless you have a primary industry that provides that foundational element to your economy. And that's true of the United States, it's true of Canada, that's true of every developed country in the world. They started by developing the resources in the ground that they had. And then they built an economy, a sustainable and mature economy with secondary and tertiary industries on top of that. It's countries that try to skip that step that generally don't provide sustainable economies nor sustainable governance models.
So how have you been able to provide the generational wealth that you're talking about, or generational opportunity that you've spoken about for the individuals who are working at these mines? Have they come just from becoming wealthy from working at the mine? Is it about wealth in general, or is it just the fact that these jobs have existed for multiple decades because that's the life cycle of a mine?
Yeah, so there's a couple elements of it. I mean, as I said earlier on, a lot of mines tend to be built in very remote parts of the world where there's generally agrarian economies, not sustainable economies, ones that have existed for multiple generations, but really haven't grown beyond that. And we're providing high-paying jobs, number one. And we like to draw from the local communities when we're building mines because that's much more economically sustainable and socially sustainable for the mine. It's a responsible thing to do, both economically and socially. But then what it does is creates opportunities for their children to go to schools. We tend to build infrastructure in the communities because we want to draw on them. So we want to have schools, we want to have hospitals and whatnot. So we're providing better healthcare, providing better access to education. And ultimately, a lot of those kids end up going to universities they wouldn't have otherwise been able to because you're operating in an agrarian economy and a very self-isolated and self-sustaining economy in these agrarian areas. And you're not providing the opportunity for those younger generations to break out and pursue professions or other trades or whatnot. So we're creating jobs locally, but we're also creating the economic opportunity for those second, third generations of our workers to go off to get educations elsewhere.
How does David Garofalo get into mining? You don't wake up one day, go to math class, take algebra, English, and say, you know what, mining, that's the thing I want to do for the rest of my life. Like, how did you even get introduced to this concept?
I completely fell into it. I was a 22-year-old, recently minted CPA working at Deloitte's. We were talking about one of your friends that works at Deloitte's in Boston, but I started with Deloitte's, did my CPA in the late 80s. Actually, I didn't even have any mining clients. I was doing financial services, the big banks. I was doing big retail on the audit side, and decided I really didn't want to have or pursue an accounting profession. I did my CPA. It gave me the foundational elements to pursue a business career and the education I needed. And a headhunter called me with an offer of a very junior accounting position in a mining company. And I said, well, I don't know anything about mining. He says, you don't need to. You need to crunch numbers and produce financial statements. I said, well, I can do that. I'll do that for a couple of years, and I'm sure I'll go find something else that will be more interesting. And what I found was mining is fascinating. As I said, you create value out of nothing. It's highly capital intensive. So you're continually in the market raising money, and then you're taking that capital and marshaling it to build these big industrial complexes in remote parts of the world, creating that kind of economic benefit and opportunity for those local communities and governments. And you're in a continuous cycle of replacing depleting assets. So you're continually raising capital, deploying capital. And so that's an exciting, dynamic business. And I really fell in love with it. And after a couple of years of crunching numbers and doing financial statements and projections and whatnot, the company I was with was starting to build mines. And they said, well, we need some financial expertise to do feasibility work and then go out for a bid on major contracts, construction contracts. We need people that are commercially oriented to help with that. So I joined a mine building team and built several mines with my first employer, then joined Agnico Eagle in 1998. We built 6 mines there. And then I ran Hudbay as CEO for 6 years, a copper producer, built 3 mines there, and then ran Goldcorp, one of the biggest gold producers in the world, and built a number of mines there. And all in all, been involved in the construction of 15 mines. And I have to say it's addictive. That process of raising capital, putting it to work, creating value is a highly addictive and highly satisfying aspect of my job.